Maybe the biggest part of my story is just my family.
I moved to Vero Beach for flight school.
Playing football, especially, I would get invited to a lot of parties.
During this time, he's like full weight on this knife trying to plunge it in me.
Like knowing the Lord brings me so much peace and joy and just confidence.
So I held this dude as he took his last breath, and it triggered this question and said, what is this life for?
Yo, what's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Thrive and Dive. Thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. The purpose of this show is to help you thrive in life. And today is another lesson that I learned when I was a high school teacher. So if you're an aspiring teacher or a communicator, I hope this impacts you. We are going through Dr. Howard Hendricks' book, Teaching to Change Lives. It's a book I read when I was a first-year teacher, and it helped transform my teaching abilities. And today, we are learning about the law of encouragement. And in his book, Dr. Howard Hendricks says this about the law of encouragement. Teaching tends to be most effective when the learner is properly motivated. So in order for us to teach well, we've got to know what motivates our students. Motivation is a very important word. I remember when I was a high school teacher, I asked my students, would you rather have an hour of uninterrupted time, but you were in a season where you're poorly motivated? Or would you rather have 15 minutes of uninterrupted time, but you're highly motivated, ready to conquer the world? And they unanimously said that they would rather have the 15 minutes of motivated time. Why? Because everything we do in life is tied to motivation. We don't do things we're not motivated to do. You and I eat because we're motivated to be fed. We're hungry. We want to get fed. You and I sleep because we're motivated to, stay alive and be in good health. So we sleep. And anything and everything we do is motivated by something. There's an underlying reason why we do what we do. We never do things that we are unmotivated to do. And even if we do things that we're unmotivated to do, there's usually an exterior motivation that's forcing us to do that, whether it's a reward or a punishment. So everything boils down to motivation. So as communicators, we need to know what motivates our students. And Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about some ways of motivating our students that is not helpful, and then he tells us the way that we should be properly motivating our students. So you should know by now that we can manipulate people to do a lot of things. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a con artist to know how to manipulate somebody. And Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about some ways that we should not motivate our student. And he refers to the first one as lollipop motivation. And this is a classic motivation tool that parents use, that teachers use for small children. And that is to promise something, a reward in return for good behavior. If a parent might tell their kid, if you sit quietly in church, we'll go get ice cream afterwards. So the kid is so determined to get that ice cream. So he will sit quietly in church, and he's not sitting quietly because that's the respectful thing to do. He's doing it because he's ready for that yummy ice cream after service. So this tactic works for a while, but eventually we learn that the person doing what they're doing is doing it just for the external motivation, not for the sake of the benefit that he'll receive from following the command or the instruction. Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about a story of a kid who memorized, 600 verses in the Bible word for word. But unfortunately, this child was caught stealing from the offering week in and week out. And they confronted him and asked, hey, do you realize that one of the verses he memorized is do not steal? And he did not see the connection between what he memorized and what he was actually doing in his conduct, because he wasn't properly motivated by the stuff he was memorizing. He was memorizing for ulterior motives. So the lollipop motivation tactic is not the motivation tactic we want to use as communicators, parents, teachers, whatever field you fall into, whatever category. A second way that we should not motivate is through guilt tripping. Unfortunately, in the church world, we are pretty good at this. We want to motivate our students, typically the younger students or youth, to do something specific, follow a certain behavior, model, excellent purity, whatever it might be, and we guilt trip them into doing that. We're like, man, you are not going to be all that God created you to be if you follow this way, which might be true. Or we threaten them with, eternal damnation, which is a true thing as well. But if we're constantly guilting people into good behavior, shaming them when they do things wrong. Eventually, that's just going to wear off from, especially a young heart, like a youth who eventually just going to be like, what? Forget it. I don't care about the shame. I don't care about the guilt. I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to do what I want. So guilt tripping is not a proper way to motivate people. Thirdly, Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about that deceiving someone is not a proper way of motivating. We can be master manipulators and overpromise and undeliver things in our communication. And unfortunately, once a student realizes that you're an overpromiser and underdeliverer, he's going to have little motivation to listen to what you have to say. So if you're maximizing things, exaggerating things, making things sound so wonderful, spray painting a turd gold, it's still a turd at the end of the day. Nothing beautiful about that. So that's not a great way to motivate people. So those are 3 ways that we are not to motivate people. Dr. Howard Hendrickson talks about the proper way to motivate students. And this has everything to do with internal motivation. So let's differentiate between external and internal motivation. The 3 bad ways of motivating people that we just talked about are examples of external motivation. You take an outside source, an outside power, or an outside reward or punishment, and you use that as a tool to motivate someone to do something or to not do something. Contrarily, internal motivation is motivation that's within the heart of the doer. They do something because they want to do something. They do something because they love to do something. They do something because they have so much love and respect of the one being asked to do, the one asking them to do something. And that's the place we want to get our students, is to be internally motivated to listen and to apply what we are learning. When I was a teacher, I came to realize that, man, the natural orthodox way of having grades for our students is really a necessary evil. You know, the A's, the B's, the C's, the D's. Like it's gets the student to start doing his work, but it can't be the end goal, right? If the student is literally just doing the work just for the grade with no intent of applying what they're learning, we have missed the mark. Grades aren't going to help you in life when you're going through real world problems. The grades are an external motivation to get the student to learn, but ultimately we want them to get beyond the grades and actually desire to learn for themselves. When I was a teacher, I really wanted my students to be so inclined to what they're hearing that they just want to hear it. And that's hard to do. It takes patience and effort, but it's a great goal to achieve. I remember specifically when it comes to internal motivation, I had a little test that I would use to see if my students were internally motivated by the content that I'm teaching. And that is the can I use the restroom test, or a puedo ir al baño test if you're teaching Spanish. That's the only Spanish I remember from high school is may I use the restroom. And every teacher has their different policy on restrooms, right? If you have a restroom pass or one at a time, this or that. I really didn't have a policy. Why? Because I wanted students to feel the freedom of having to go to use the restroom. Because here's the thing. Most students use the restroom because they have to use the restroom. They have to pee, whatever. But a lot of people use the restroom, myself included when I was in high school, is because I'm so bored. I need something to do. I need to get the blood flowing. I need to get out of my seat and move around. And that's a big reason why a lot of people go to the bathroom. And here's the thing. Even if you have to use the restroom, if you are so inclined in learning what this teacher has to say, you can hold it. It's amazing how functional our bladders are at holding our bathroom need if we are properly motivated to stay and listen to what the person has to say. You know how many times I'm in a movie theater, I've had to use the restroom, but I'm like, I can't be missing any part of the movie or else I'm going to be lost, right? So I hold that sucker in. So we're fully capable of doing this. I remember in college having such a wonderful professor that I'm like, man, I cannot miss anything he is sharing. He is just dropping truth bombs every class period. I remember I had to use the restroom so bad. I couldn't hold it in. I didn't want to make a scene. So this is probably unorthodox and unethical, but I set my phone down by the professor. I was sitting up in the front row and I just started to record what he was saying so that when I used the restroom and the class period was done, I could listen to the part I missed because it was just that important and that good. could. And I was just that internally motivated to hear what he has to say, right? Are your students that internally motivated that they will record you as they're using the restroom because they just can't miss what you have to say? Unfortunately, that's not the case. And the bathroom test is a great way to determine, are your students properly motivated? And don't be discouraged. I know one time I was teaching a group of seniors, and I felt like I was going off the chain with my illustrations, the principles, the application. Like, man, I even added probably a video element to it, and I feel like I'm just hitting all the marks for to increase internal motivation of my students. And unfortunately, one student who's notorious for raising his hand for one reason, he asked if he could use the restroom. And I remember being so defeated. I'm like, man, I thought I was I thought I was speaking so hard that the paint was coming off the walls, right? This is everything the students need to be internally motivated. But there are exceptions to the rule. For some reason, that student was not internally motivated. But needless to say, that is our goal. Let's tap into that internal motivation. If you've got to use external motivation like grades, for example, so be it, a necessary evil, but the hope and goal is to get them to want to learn what they're learning. So Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about how we can increase this internal motivation, and that's through good teaching, good training. And he splits this up into 3 stages. The first stage to good teaching that increases motivation is the telling stage. This is a stage we all can do pretty intuitively, and that's just yapping, just talking, sharing the information, okay? Obviously, a very important part of the job. If you don't tell someone what they're supposed to do, how are they supposed to do it? But this is just scratching the surface. If you just tell students what they need to know and how they do it and why they need to do it, that's not sufficient. This then leads us to the showing stage. This is where we put meat on the bones. This is where rubber meets the road, and you give a real-life demonstration and show them how to do it. I remember I got to be an assistant coach for a girls' high school soccer team at the school I worked for, and I remember the head coach, kind of trying to tell me the drills that we're going to be doing for the day. And as much as he told me, probably flawlessly, and it was wonderful, I couldn't understand the complete picture until I actually saw an example of it. Your students are probably most likely the same way. We're very visually oriented. We need to see what we're being told. So if we can demonstrate to them, and typically the best way to do this is through story or illustration, because we can't always, be hands-on in the classroom and, go to an actual, crime scene where we can show them how to work things. But if you have that opportunity, by all means do so. We want to unlock all of the senses, smell, taste, sight, all those different senses. But at the bare minimum, at least give a demonstration through story or illustration to show how to complete what's been told in the first stage. And then this leads to the final stage, and this is actually the doing stage, and this harkens back to if you have the opportunity to do some hands-on learning. I'm a firm believer that hands-on learning is the way to go in education. Have them feel, touch, taste, and smell all those different aspects of what you're teaching them. Doing it project-based learning, whatever you want to call it. But the doing aspect is so important. And this last stage that Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about can be split into 2 stages, if you will. And the first aspect of the doing stage is create a controlled situation, right? Don't just throw them into the real world. Give them maybe a mock trial, if you will, or it's a controlled environment of how to do things. So, for example, if you're teaching evangelism to a student, which is the spreading of the gospel in faith circles, maybe give them, be the subject for them, and they try to, share truth with you, ask them questions that someone else might learn, and it's a controlled environment. Nothing crazy is going to happen because you're clearly in control. And then once that has been done, take them to an uncontrolled environment. That's the second component to the stage of doing. And the best way when it comes to the example of evangelism is take them to the actual streets of New York City or to wherever you live and have them talk to real life people that have real thoughts, that will share real feedback. And they'll learn pretty quick of the things they know how to do and how not to do. Because here's the thing. And Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about it several times in his book that sometimes students can get on their high horse and think, I know everything. This class is not going deep enough for me. This happens in a lot of our churches, right? The pastor is just not deep enough. I need more truth, more theology. And the thing is, that's not typically the case. What's happening or what's not happening is that you're not really going into real life situations applying what you're learning. It's just stored up in your noggin, great. But when it comes to actually applying it in the real world, you'll start to realize how, oh my goodness, I need to be working on a lot of things. So if you as a communicator, a teacher can create a controlled and then an uncontrolled environment to where the students get to do what you have taught them, that is going to increase their ability to learn and to apply. The last aspect of the law of encouragement that Dr. Howard Hendricks talks about is that you need to be creative in your motivation. Everybody can get motivated, but the way you motivate people is not the same. We're not cookie cutters here. We've got to be creative in how we motivate people. And this is easier said than done. And this requires you to know your students, your audience, which is something we've talked about in a previous lesson, right? If you don't know your students and what gets them to tick, it's going to be very hard to get them to be motivated. I remember a 10th grader who will remain nameless. Let's just call him Benji. Benji was not our star student, if you will, concerning just like academics, right? And not your typical A+ student. But I wanted to motivate Benji. And I kind of stumbled upon this motivation tool. But I basically, long story short, we're learning about the book of Exodus. And I wanted them to demonstrate their knowledge of the book of Exodus and Moses through song form. It can be any type of song. And this student lit up. He created a rap with his group. It was a group assignment. And I've never seen this student so motivated to work on a Bible assignment in Old Testament class. But it had to do with a rap and with, finding a place to film it. It's like a music video type thing. And he went all in. And the content of the rap was great. It was all the things we learned about Exodus, all the important information, the need to know stuff. And he just lit up. If I were to have him just take notes on it, study it, and regurgitate it on a test, he probably wouldn't have come up with anything great. Probably got an F if we're just being frank, right? But because I gave an assignment that was creatively wired to his motivation, he ate that for breakfast. And then some students didn't, right? That wasn't the way they were motivated. Creating a rap or a song wasn't their passion. So for you, being creative is so important. And if you want to become a good communicator, in my experience, try communicating to a different range of demographics and age groups, right? I had the opportunity as a high schooler to teach at my church's Sunday school to the grammar school kids, 1st through 5th grade. And that gave me some abilities to speak to the younger students. And the way I teach to the younger students are very different than how I teach to middle school and high schoolers. And I've had the experience of teaching high school, as I've already shared before multiple times. I've got the opportunity to share at a youth group, work as a student pastor. And you got to do different things to reach those different audiences. And I've had the opportunity to teach adults, and that's even very different. The way you teach adults is very different than how you teach youth. But the core thing is the same for all these demographics, and that is motivation. You've got to motivate your audience. So that's the same regardless of age and stage. So if you're able to be creatively adaptive to your audience in order to motivate them, that's so important. Unfortunately, a lot of people that speak to adults are very bad at speaking to the youth. And that honestly might be an indication that they're just not the best communicator they could be. Because if you're a good communicator, you know that motivation is the key and you will adapt your methods in order to reach your audience. Sometimes as communicators, we get so set in our ways, like this is how we teach. I ain't changing for nobody. And that is rule number 1 of how to be a bad teacher. You've got to be willing to change the way you communicate in order to reach the audience that is listening to you. You've got to be able to motivate them, right? This is such I get a little passionate about this, so I apologize. But sometimes, we get so set in our ways that we're like, I'm not going to change who I am or what I do in order to reach the person that I'm teaching to. And that is just so unfortunate. Take an example, older folks, maybe, if you're an older folks, being so set in your ways and your style of music, right? That you're unwilling to listen to the music of the younger generation in order to reach them. And that's honestly, not trying to guilt trip you, but shame on you for not being willing to understand the demographic you're reaching. Because you know what gets youth fired up? Typically rap music, right? And if you're like, no, rap music's of the devil, I'm not going to use that as my medium to reach your kid. Well, you're going to be lost in the past, my friend. You're not going to be able to reach that younger student. So similarly, if you're working with adults and the community that you're trying to reach has different passions than you, different interests than you, for example, a lot of people love college football here in Florida. I'm not a big college football guy. I'm a soccer guy. Couldn't care less about football. But if I want to reach that demographic, I got to be in the know about college football. So I find out ways to understand football and care about football so that I can reach the person I am trying to share, specifically in my case, the gospel with, and build a bridge in order for them to understand what I'm sharing with them. So yes, you can have your preferences. Yes, you can have your ways of doing things. But if you want to reach the people of all ages and stages, you got to be a creative motivator. Think outside the box. Us as Christians, we have a beautiful tool that allows us to be creative, and that is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit lives inside of you if you're a child of God, and he can give you ideas and promptings that will be things that you never thought you would do. Like, man, like what are you sharing with me, Holy Spirit? And the Holy Spirit will give you that nudge, like this is how you're going to reach that person. Submit yourself to that. Don't take yourself too seriously, because the Holy Spirit might ask you to do things that are counterintuitive. I remember the Holy Spirit asked me to rap at the end of a Sunday morning sermon in front of the older crowd, right? I'm like, man, this could work maybe in a youth group, but in a Sunday morning service, how are they going to take this, right? But if I took myself too seriously, I might have never done that. But because I didn't take myself so seriously, I did it. And it was actually a great thing. A lot of people were touched by it, which is just crazy. And that's all credit to the Holy Spirit. So from the top, this is the law of encouragement. And as it states, teaching tends to be most effective when the learner is properly motivated. Motivate your students. Well, guys, thanks for taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the like button. If you enjoy the content here on Thrive and Dive, be sure to subscribe. If you're watching this on Spotify, if you can do me a favor and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed the content. But we'll see you next time. This is Thrive and Dive, thriving in life as we dive into deeper conversations. Have a great rest of your day.